There we go.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Standards Committee meeting today, Friday, the 8th of November, 2024. Can I just say to, if there are any members of the public out there, apologies for the slight delay. We had a technical issue, so thank you for your consideration and waiting to join us. Right then, if I now go to the agenda, agenda item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, so Chair, can we please record an apology from Councillor Lisa Mitton and an apology from Councillor Declan Stanlon, but just to record that we need to confirm who will remain as members of the Standards Committee, because there's been a change in the administration of the authority since our last meeting, and I'll explain a little bit about that in a moment.
Okay, and that's an action that you take forward then, isn't it? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest from anybody?
There's one, it's slightly tangential, but it's probably worth mentioning. By dint of being chair of the Brecon Beacons National Park Authority Standards Committee, I'm now on the Mid Wales CJC Standards Committee. I suspect that doesn't impact on us because we're part of capital region here, aren't we? So, but just it's fully worth just noting.
Yes, I don't think that causes any difficulty, but yeah, it's definitely worth having it on record.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's duly noted. Thank you, Martin. No other declarations of interest?
No,
okay, thank you. If we now go on to agenda item 3, and that's the minutes of the meeting that were held on the 26th of July 2024. You have copies in front of you. I'll now take you through for accuracy. Page 1 of those minutes, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Are we happy that that was a true and accurate record of that meeting?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. If we now go back through, and I'll take you through for any matters that are not on the agenda, which are outstanding and need to be dealt with before we move on to the next agenda item. I'll go on to the first page, second page, third, and fourth. Any issue from anybody? I have one, just clarification, if I could. At the last meeting, at item number 991, Mr. Simon Jones gave us an update on the Constitution, Carys, and he indicated that, as and when appropriate, he would the Standards Committee with training in relation to the changes that impact on this committee from the Constitution. Do you have any update on that?
I hoped to catch Simon Jones just before I came into this meeting, but I missed him. So I think what we will do when we schedule our next meeting, which I guess is likely to be in January, we can just agenda that he will come and do an update for you then and some training then. Okay, then I will duly note that as an action for yourself, yes? Yeah. Okay, having gone through the minutes both for accuracy and for the issues in relation to items not on the agenda, I'm happy to approve those minutes. Yes. Thank you. Minutes duly approved. Thank you. If we now proceed and we go on to agenda item 4, appointment of Vice Chair of the Standards Committee. As I indicated at the last meeting, our previous Vice Chair, Mr. Julian John, resigned that position and indeed stood down from the Standards Committee, and it was agreed that we would put out expressions of interest for the role of Vice Chair. Unless anybody has at the any last minute declarations, Dawn, I can confirm then that you are happy to have your name put forward, and there's been no objection to that, and I've received no other declarations of interest that anybody would like to be the Vice Chair. Are we happy to approve Dawn's appointment as our Vice Chair?
Thank you very much.
For those that are present, and Gareth, I can see you online. Are you happy to approve?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Duly appointed, congratulations or commiserations, Donna, that you are now the Vice Chair. Be assured of the support of myself as your Chair, and I'm sure the same will apply to every one of the members around the table. Thank you. We now go on to agenda item 5, and that's our annual report. If we have a report from our Modern Officer, Carys.
Yes, so members will recall that we are supposed to do an annual report as soon as we can after the Council has its annual general meeting. So that's in May. and the fact that we're talking about this at the beginning of November means there has been a delay. So the reason for the delay, this is a little bit convoluted, but let me try and explain. The annual report, as a matter of statute, has to comment on the responses we've received from the leaders of the political groups represented on the council as to their duty to ensure compliance of their members with the Code of Conduct. So it's a statutory duty on them to provide a report about how they've ensured compliance, and then the Standards Committee report deals with how they have done that, and then reports about what the Standards Committee has done for the year. Very quickly, what happened, as you will probably all be aware, was that we had a council which was equally split, so that we had 15 members of an independent group and 15 members of a Labour group. What then happened is that 2 members of the Labour group split and went to form a separate, well, in fact, they didn't form a group, they both became independent, standing alone members. But then one of the independent group resigned his position as a member, and that forced a by-election. So on the 5th of September, there was a by-election, and that led to the election of a new councillor, Councillor Jill Preston, and she is a member of the Labour group. At that point also, the main independent group split a little bit further, and that led to a position where the independent group, which had been the administration of the authority, no longer held a majority, and so the then leader, Councillor Geraint Thomas, resigned, and a new leader was appointed, that being Councillor Brent Carter. Councillor Brent Carter is the leader of the Labour group and is therefore the leader of the council now, and the council is now a Labour-led administration. I tell you all of that because in amongst all of that, there was so much change of position and people changing groups that it was almost impossible for the leaders of political groups to provide us with their report. They have now done that as they formed into their new groups, and we have had the reports from the leaders of the political groups in accordance with the statute. And so what we will need to do now as quickly as we can is pull together your annual report, which will be Mel's report, but which will come to you all for approval, and then we'll need to submit that report to various places. It needs to be approved at council, and it needs to go to the Ombudsman's office because they keep a record of them. So we'll need to get our skates on and get that done as quickly as possible. But that's the update on it. Those are the reasons why it was as delayed as it has been.
Any questions, guys?
So it sounds really interesting times.
That's a Chinese curse, isn't it? May you live in interesting times.
You mentioned that the independent group is now 2 groups. Is that still the case? So my question is, how many leaders' reports have you actually got? So we've got 2 or 4?
We've had 3. We have 3 political groups. We also have 2 still independents. So the main independent group has split, so that is now 2 groups. The Labour group remains a Labour group, and then there are 2 separate independents, but they have a personal responsibility to ensure compliance with the code rather than the group leaders enforcing them.
Do we have it? So, thank you, Martin. Do we have a date, Carys, when we have to submit the report by?
Well, there isn't a deadline date, but the expectation is that it's as soon as possible after May. So what we will have to do is, if we get it drawn up as quickly as possible, if you're going to have another meeting in January, it should be available for everyone to approve in January. We can then report it to council, and I can then send it to the Ombudsman's office as well, but with an explanation for the delay, as Gareth Richards indicated.
Yes, Gareth.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Gareth.
Sorry, Chair. I thought there were 3 independents.
You may be right.
Yes.
I'm just trying to. Oh, you're right. Actually, yes. Sorry,
Yes.
I had missed an independent. You're right. There are three, but there are three groups still, but there are three people who have gone off separately.
Yeah. I think perhaps pointing out as well for the members' clarification, there is an independent as part of the cabinet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that information is very useful. What I will do with it, Gareth, I do not know, but thank you very much.
It's probably worth saying, that point having been made by Councillor Richards, that given the very close division between the splits between the party groups, the appointment of somebody who is not a member of the lead administration group was designed to show an inclusivity, an attempt to work together rather than to be party political.
Okay. Can I make a suggestion based on what you've said about it? I'm just conscious, and now we're in November, if the annual report or the draft of the report is prepared before Christmas, let's just say in the next month, and I don't want it to wait until the next meeting. So what I would suggest that we send a draft to each one of us,
yeah,
with a survey date of, can you come back with any observations in the next 5 days? And if nobody comes back, or they just say we agree with it, then I'll take the executive decision as your chair to say that let's submit it and we get it off. What I'm trying to say is I wouldn't want it being on the shelf waiting for a month.
Yes, save time.
Yes, absolutely.
And we can get it done. And I'll come up with cars, and obviously you and I will get close dialogue in the next couple of weeks in relation to this and its content, and indeed my forward, etc.
Yeah.
So that we can get it ready, rather than it sort of drag on there.
Yes.
So
that's really helpful. Thank you.
Are we all happy with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Was there anything else on that particular agenda item?
No.
And no further questions, observations from anybody? Thank you. If we go on to agenda item 6, and that's an update on the Ombudsman and action that has been taken and decisions that have been made by the Ombudsman in relation to a specific issue. Over to you, Carlos.
Yes. So again, members will recall that we have been keeping under review the fact that the Ombudsman was undertaking an investigation in respect of a complaint where that complaint had already been dealt with by standards, having a full hearing and having come to a determination. So there are two issues about it. One is the fact that there was this ongoing investigation by the Ombudsman and just the sheer amount of time that was taking. And then there was the second issue, which was about where procedurally the Standards Committee stands, because it seemed that the Ombudsman's office was saying that the Standards Committee shouldn't have dealt with that investigation. If I deal with that latter point first, what the Ombudsman has now said is that the local dispute resolution procedure should be limited in its use. So it should only be used for lower level disagreements, and I think we'd all effectively understood that. But what the Ombudsman is now saying is, broadly, if anything could amount to a breach of the Code of Conduct, then that really should be referred to the Ombudsman. So that's fine. That's the view of the Ombudsman. It may well mean that the Ombudsman receives considerably more complaints, whereas a previous incumbent of that office had been very clear that he didn't want to receive more complaints. That is where we are. We very rarely have complaints that need to go to that level anyway. But what I will do is, if we do receive any complaints that can't be resolved just by either mediation by me, asking people to discuss things, or mediation by Mel and I together, then I'll let you know whether something has had to be referred to the Ombudsman, because what may then happen is that the Ombudsman will, having considered it, refer it back to you to be determined. So it just means that there's another step in there. Over time, we will see how well or otherwise that works, and we may find that the Ombudsman will issue different guidance at some point. So does anybody have any questions about that part? Because then I'll go on and talk about what's happened.
Well, it seems to make the Standards Committee almost nugatory, because we're a bit of a toothless tiger then if we can't deal with even low-level complaints. And any low-level complaint has always got the potential for it to be escalated. But what's the term of the Ombudsman?
I don't think there is. I don't think there's a time frame of the term of office.
So this is just
it's until that person retires. Just to pick up that first point, it doesn't mean that you will not be asked to determine things. It just means that they won't come straight to you. They may have to go through a route whereby the Ombudsman considers them first and then could refer them back to you. So standards committees across Wales do have matters referred back to them by the Ombudsman. And I suspect that it's really just about regularising things and ensuring that there's a sort of an equal threshold. So if the Ombudsman makes those decisions as to whether they come back to the Standards Committee rather than them being made by us locally, then I think the Ombudsman's view is, firstly, that we don't intervene in anything that we wouldn't be able to impose sufficient sanction should it be necessary. And secondly, that there's a standard or a threshold which is equally applied across the country. So I think that's...
It seems as though it's an escalation before it potentially a de-escalation.
Yes.
And that's fine if that's the way the Ombudsman wants to play it. However, when you've got what you can't forget is that at the next of this, there's an individual who this is now being drawn out and being escalated way beyond where it potentially shouldn't have been, which doesn't seem very fair on that individual, which for something that could be a minor complaint that could have been dealt with quite quickly. So they wouldn't be hanging on, they wouldn't be going through all those stress levels and everything else. So it just seems really bizarre to me.
I think time is probably one of the most significant things, because I will in a second explain to you what has then happened about the complaint that triggered all of this off. But suffice to say, it was resolved last month, so beginning of October, I think it was, and that was 18 months after the first complaint was made. So there really is an issue about the well-being of people who are the subject of complaints. If we have control of it, we deal with it locally. We dealt with it. The standards hearing was some 3-4 months after the first complaint had been made. Whereas if it goes to the Ombudsman, it's likely to be a year before it, even if it were going to be referred back, then it's going to come back to you, and then you would need to do your process. But there it is. That's the way the Ombudsman says it needs to be done, and so that's the way we will need to do it.
At the end of the day, it's out of our hands. We're subject to what the Ombudsman says and dictates. So.
I'll just chip in one thing, and I'll bring in Jeff if I need to,
because she's already answered.
All right, and then Pauline then, okay? Yeah. It's just that it does fly in the face of Martin, with your other seat on, with your fire service standards hat on. Both you and I, I'm presuming you were, I think you were there, but going back a number of months when we had with the All Wales chairs, the Ombudsman was there, and I specifically asked them, what's the one thing that we can do as standards committees locally to assist you with your workload? And he came back was the deal quickly with the informal. So I suspect, and that's what she said, that is what you want. So I suspect they might have, I presume they might have just misjudged it. And I think this is one of these things that I wouldn't surprise me. They might just go back and have another look at it and say, because the point you just made, Martin, they will be inundated with complaint, and for an organisation that's got a heavy workload now, I Anyway, so watch this space, I would say, but I know you'll do your bit behind the scenes for us and keep us updated. Pauline, I do apologise.
No,
I
it's
could have
fine. I mean, my comments, I suppose, being covered by what Dawn has said, is that it is about the well-being of the individual who's involved in the incident, and also the person that brought the complaint as well, because of the way things are going to change, the waiting time will increase. And what Mel's just said now, I think, is important. That, well, not important, but it is that maybe the Ombudsman will reflect and look at the workload that's coming through and think, actually, we can't deal with this because it's just going to take that much longer, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Has there perhaps been something else that's made a knee-jerk decision?
No, it's not that. It is that in the way that the local dispute resolution procedures have evolved, the Ombudsman took legal advice and took the view that standards committees were dealing with things which were outside the legislative provision. And that, we can't argue with that. So the whole issue about breach of the code of conduct, and if the breach might have led to a sanction being imposed, it's about standards committees dealing with things where the potential for a sanction to be imposed would have been outside of their powers. So there's a perfectly valid argument around it. It's going to be about the consequences of that argument, and I think only time will tell. Exactly as you've all said, it's something that we will have to see how it works, and then it may be that the Ombudsman will then want to issue some sort of different directive about it.
Thank you. Any further observations, comments? Gareth, anything from you? No? Okay. Thank you, Gareth.
Well, shall I then just deal
On the
with
next part, yes.
So,
No, thanks, Chair. Sorry.
Thank you, Gareth.
The second part of the Ombudsman update is to deal with that specific case where you had a hearing, where you had heard from the relevant parties, you had considered all of that information and made a decision that there had been a breach of the code of conduct, but that no sanction was required because you were satisfied that the member concerned had taken the necessary action, and that she was ensuring that she had the proper advice and she had looked into her responsibilities, and was conscious that she needed to ensure that sort of thing didn't happen again. So the Ombudsman's report finds that she had breached the code of conduct, that there was no need for a sanction, and that she had taken all the relevant action to ensure that she didn't breach again. So, yes, I mean, there we are.
So they've upheld the decision
Yes,
that you made.
Exactly. So on the one hand, what we can say is that that is an endorsement that you as a standards committee had dealt with it entirely properly, and that the outcome that you recorded was in fact what the Ombudsman herself came to.
Never adapt.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But the issue, of course, is exactly that. It's about a person,
The time.
and that person waited 18 months for that outcome, which is unfortunate, isn't it, at best. But it is an endorsement that the outcome you came to was the outcome that the Ombudsman came to as well.
It feels a little bit like the whole jeopardy almost, doesn't it?
Yeah.
At the very least, we don't think it was strong enough, so we'll try you again. So I'm really nervous about some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that was our concern, was that this was contrary to natural justice, that somebody had faced a tribunal where their actions were considered and a conclusion was reached, but that because the complainant was quite within their rights then to take it to the Ombudsman, having then accepted that, then put that person through another trial on exactly the same basis. So that was part of the argument that we were putting forward to the Ombudsman, and the Ombudsman's response to that is, yes, so we cut out the part where the Standards Committee decides it first, and the Ombudsman decides first, whether that's a referral back to the Standards Committee or whether it's that the Ombudsman decides it. But that deals with that natural justice element, because it wouldn't be two people trying it. It would be one person either referring it back to standards to be the only decision maker, or the Ombudsman being the only decision maker.
But using that, what that does then is takes the appeal process out of the system.
Yeah, it
Yes,
does.
it does.
Yeah. There isn't an appeal process.
Yeah.
There isn't an appeal process. This was our argument. You see, there is no provision for an appeal process from your decision, nor would there be from the Ombudsman's decision. So it's what we were faced with was a situation where there had been an appeal process created which didn't actually exist. So that was what we were really concerned about, and Mel had raised it a number of times at the Standards Chair Forum. So what the Ombudsman has said actually eliminates that. It's just about, in a practical sense, whether that adds further delay into the process.
I mean, what happened in reality is the complainant in the case that we sat on the hearing for wasn't happy with the decision, so complained about our decision. It's not an appeal; it's a complaint about our decision.
Well, yes, in terms, but that because of the defect in the process, he wasn't actually doing that. What he was doing was what he was perfectly entitled to do, which was he complained to one level, and then having not liked the outcome of that, it was still available to him to complain to the next level. And so there was nothing wrong
Which
with
is
what
an
the
appeals
complainant
process.
did. It was because there was an aberration in the procedure that we've got, and that's what we've now eliminated. So that's the positive to come out of it.
Yeah, well, what I was very happy with, really in court adjudication or a decision, is that this standards committee followed due process properly, procedures, everything was done properly, expeditiously, and we put people that were involved in the process through less of an ordeal than they went through afterwards. So there was nothing wrong with what we did. In fact, we did it perfectly correct, which I'm very pleased with it. Sorry, Jeff.
That's okay. Chair, I don't know whether it's within our powers or what we're allowed to do, but it would seem to me to be reasonable to say back to the state, to the Ombudsman, that the sheer amount of time that this took, on your part, Vice Chair, exactly what the people were put through. And in that respect, by her actually intervening took a lot longer than it should have done and put people through a lot of stress. Could we just write back to them or say something along the lines, Chair, that this time limit is really unacceptable? And I don't know how else we say it other than it just put both parties, as you said, under the stress and strain.
That lived experience has been.
I think what I can tell you is that point has been done to death.
Okay, fair enough.
Everybody complains all of the time about how long it takes. The Ombudsman's office is very, very much under pressure. They had an incident earlier this year which meant that they had to review a number of cases because of the conduct of one of their officers, and that put them under even more pressure. The Ombudsman is acutely aware of how long they take to deal with things and the impact that can have on members. And in all of my correspondence with them about that specific case, I have repeatedly said, really, how long is this going to take? Because this person is just waiting for an outcome. So the Ombudsman is very much aware that is our concern. I think it's difficult, but I think the only thing we can do is wait and see how this plays out, because it doesn't happen that often that things escalate to a level where they would even be brought to you under our ordinary process. So if we would have to say, well, they wouldn't come to us first, they would go to the Ombudsman first. Again, it's so rare that it happens. I think all we can do is wait and see.
And of course, we as a committee, a standards committee, are richer for the experience, because having trod that journey, we're able to identify it and perhaps do some remedial action immediately, show the similar incident. And of course, I know Martin, with his chair seat from the Fire Service Ombudsman, we will make sure that the All Wales chairs are briefed in an appropriate way. So, because they're all watching this space, because it could impact on any standards committee throughout Wales.
And like you said, perhaps on reflection, or when they've had time to reflect and had more, then it may well change. The stance may change again. So we've just got to hope for that.
But the matter is not finalised. confirmation of that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Carys, was there anything else on that?
No,
particular
nothing
side?
on that.
Were there any further questions, observations, or comments? Yeah, thank you for that. It was an interesting update, and of course, nice to talk through the issues. We now go on to agenda item 7.
Sorry, Matt.
Yes, no problem, Martin.
Before we, you leave Ombudsman specifically, just to say that the Ombudsman doesn't do a casebook anymore, but it does do a quarterly newsletter.
Yes.
And it landed yesterday.
Yes.
So for those who don't subscribe to the Ombudsman, which I heartily endorse, perhaps rather wait till January to see it. Perhaps Carys, you could send that.
I think we can send it around. What I normally do is report it to you. So we will report it to you at the next meeting anyway, but we can send it around in the meantime and just...
like yourself, Martin, I subscribed as well. I've seen it, and there are some interesting things in the report related to standards and complaints, etc. But I thought rather than discuss it now, in conversation with Carys before the meeting, it's better for all colleagues, all members, to have seen the detail because there might be further questions.
Yes.
So we can address it in January. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. And now on to agenda item 7, recruitment of independent members of the Standards Committee. Let's see the verbal update of our Minister.
Yes, you can have a wholly inadequate verbal update. I can't remember how many people applied. Was it 5? 5. Yes, so we have had, we put our advert out, we have had 5 responses. They all seem to be people that we would certainly consider. So what Mel and I will need to do is work out a date when we can interview people and see if we can interview them this side of Christmas with a view to somebody coming to your next meeting as a new appointee.
And we'll keep updated. I mean, we'll sort out the panel's composition and indeed we'll talk through it. And if it is required, if another member is required to come on that, we'll sort it out and we'll come up with some dates. And I think, as we discussed earlier, we'll get some dates sorted out and we'll see who's available for us to put a panel together. But yeah, very pleased with all the applicants. We won't go into any details now, of course, but every one of them, Carys and I went through and the criteria, met that criteria that would be acceptable, and quite a diverse range of backgrounds.
That's good.
So looking forward to interviewing and having a new member by the next weekend. Thank you. Any questions, observations on that subject from anybody?
Perhaps outside of the meeting, I'll have a conversation with you that any leftovers I might want to steal for somewhere else. First reserves.
Can I disclose the detail of those people to you? Yeah, I'm sure we can find a way around that.
I'll connect you to another democratic service. So somewhere else, yes.
I'm going to jump now because I think I should have A or B before the date of the next meeting here. So I'll go to agenda item 9, which is any other item deemed urgent. I've just got one thing. It's not urgent. It's just a quick update. Has there anybody else got anything first? It's just an update from our last meeting. As I said I would, I'm picking up on Carys's update on the change of leadership in the local authority and different party. I did, as I said I would, which I did last time with the last leadership team. I met at a one-to-one session with both the leader and the deputy leader on Wednesday, where I went through, if I may say this in a bold way, what our expectations as a standards committee, the stance that we feel that the local authority should make, picking up on the impact that leaders can have on appropriate behaviour and standards, not just of the leadership group, but the leaders of all parties, their role as both ambassadors for appropriate behaviour, ambassadors for the code of conduct, and the way we would want and expect conduct to be made, the role in relation to supporting individuals from their parties, and perhaps dealing with the cut and thrust of local politics in a way that perhaps when things are just sort of opinion on how they feel they can deal with them. And I must admit that the response I got was very positive, and there is an expectation that they take on board themselves, that they have a role to play in addressing appropriate behaviours, the application of code of conduct, and the way that they conduct themselves and the way they impart that knowledge and that behaviour towards others. So it's very, very supportive. The other thing that came out of it, when I first started here, with the last council leadership team, they asked me to come, which I wanted to do anyway, to address the full council, to talk about the rule of standards and the expectations we have, etc., etc. And I think that was addressed the way forward at the time. And they've asked me, as part of the new leadership team, to do exactly the same at the next when at full council. So I will do that, but just the same as I spoke last time on the issues raised, with an added plus, personal experience, etc. And indeed, Dawn, I would ask you as the Vice Chair to come along, not just to be there to hear what I say, but also and if there's any input you wish to make, etc.
I think that's really interesting. It's the way forward, isn't it? Just to reinforce what's expected. Yeah. And if you're present and you're reinforcing that message, it's not coming
across
other channels, you're coming directly from representation, from standards.
And what it does, because I'm conscious with any local authority, any organisation, there's a group of very experienced councillors who've been on the block and they know procedures and processes. Yes. And as we found in that particular hearing, a lot of what came up was I wasn't aware we had to do that. Yeah. There's a training issue. And I can address that with the younger members and build in stuff like that, which I did previously, and I will do again, whilst advocating the issues of the code of conduct and the expectations and how we conduct ourselves should we have a hearing, an investigation, etc., etc. Sorry, Martin.
So something that another standards committee is thinking of, or actually not thinking of, they're actually doing, is actually doing a series of observations of committees and council meetings to get first-hand experience of behaviours and how things
that's very interesting. Yeah.
I wonder whether, from your discussions with the political group leaders, they think there are any issues which they think they have some perhaps more unruly members and they might benefit from. The standards committee is watching.
I'll take on board that. The only problem then, if you identify inappropriate behaviour, you're compromised. A compromise. So I would, if I be frank,
inappropriate stuff's the right word, but people who don't play a little faster loose with the rules sometimes.
Well, I would much rather give that ownership and empowerment to the leaders to resolve it. If they can't resolve it, then we can go in then as we say problem solvers and help. But as opposed to randomly sitting and observing, I'm just conscious that if something could happen which is on the edge, doesn't require good action, but it could be part of an escalation if we witnessed that we did nothing. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. So I would much rather us sit ready to do our role in relation to the Constitution and the role of the Standards Committee, but also I have no problem with us acting as critical friends, problem solvers, advisors, and ambassadors of that code of conduct if it should be required from our leaders. And I'm sure, Carlos, you'd be there.
Yes, absolutely. I think the other point to make is that you can watch Cabinet and Council and some of the scrutiny committees on a stream. So you can watch them, and if you do see anything that you think you're really not happy with the way that was dealt with or somebody conducted themselves, you could bring that to this committee so that we can take it back to the leader. It's not then you attending a meeting as an observer and having a duty to do something. It's about you as a member of the public looking at something and thinking whether you're satisfied that was the way of dealing with it. I think I agree with your point now. You could almost end up being a witness in something where you are also the tribunal. Yeah. So you need to not get yourself into that position, I think. Interesting if somebody is doing it somewhere else, because it'll be interesting to see if that happens and they end up drawn in.
Without getting the details of which organisation it is, it was brought to my attention that there was some inappropriate behaviour in a meeting, and it was somebody who wasn't actively participating in a meeting, driving a car.
Oh, right, okay.
And so when votes came up, it was really difficult for them to do that, etc., etc. They wondered what was the best way to take that forward, given it was an organisation which has political group leaders leading to going. And so, in the end, the chief executive and I, as chair of standards, agreed to sort of write to all the members just to remind them about behaviours. And that was the sort of trigger for that, because we don't have that step that you're talking about. So I think you're absolutely right, Chair, that the political leaders should be first made aware. If they aren't in a committee where that happens, then You should put them to the video of the meeting as well, perhaps.
Yeah, indeed.
We do also have
Yeah.
policy about remote attendance
Yeah.
and how and from where anybody can join. You can see Councillor Gareth Richards, entirely appropriate from a stable and secure environment. But there are all sorts of stories about members joining from caravans in a caravan park, and people joining from the pub when the football was on, and these kind of things. So we have a policy which says there are rules about where you can be when you join. So if anybody saw somebody who seemed to be somewhere inappropriate, then the route would be that a complaint should come to me, and then I can address it with the political group leaders or whosoever.
But early indications, sorry, Don, I'll bring you in. Early indications are that meeting I had with the leader and the deputy, very, very positive, very supportive, and you know, it was hard into some of the comments they made, but they also want us to have the very best standards committee, and we can only be the very best standards committee if all the members and all the elected members play their part in abiding by the code of conduct and continue with appropriate behaviour. You know, which is it should be. Don't, sorry, I bring it in.
No, sorry, it's just this point. Thank you, Chair. I think it's quite interesting, and from an observer's perspective, it would be good. It would be a good opportunity to see if there's any trends, and also to assess the climate in there. But I do agree that you're massively compromised if things do go a bit south, and there's inappropriate behaviour, and you witness it, because then you can't sit on a tribunal and because you were an active witness to that event. But yeah, it's very interesting that there are some potential organisations that are going that way, and I can see the benefits, but there are pitfalls there, definitely. And Chair, just on I'm more than happy. I'd love to attend with you if you just give me some dates or whenever you want to do it.
As soon as I've got them done,
Thank you.
And the team. Right, that's all it for me. Were there any other items that anybody wishes to discuss now before I close the meeting? No? Right. Can I just thank everybody for their contribution, for everybody across, but thank you, Gareth, online there. Thanks to the members of the public who might be viewing the meeting today. Thank you very much for your interest in relation to the work of our Standards Committee. And that's the end of the meeting. And then date of the next meeting.
And here I sit without even a diary in front of me. I think it's towards the end of January.
Yeah.
Friday towards the end of January. Anybody want to offer something?
Friday the 24th of January is towards the end.
That sounds good to me.
I can't do that.
Right. What one could you do? Do you want
the one probably before
the
that.
17th?
Yeah.
Could you do this?
Friday the 17th? No? Yes.
Yeah.
I can do
17th. You 17th. Good.
Should we provisionally put the 17th?
Gareth, you okay for the 17th? Do you know?
Yeah, that's fine at the moment. Yeah.
And indeed, if members of the public are watching, it's Friday the 17th of January.
There we are.
Same time, 2 p.m.
Marvellous.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you.
That's the